Most people stay in relationships that slowly drain them, not because they cannot leave, not because they do not see what is happening, but because leaving feels like failure, because the discomfort of staying is familiar enough to manage, because somewhere underneath the frustration, they keep hoping the other person will eventually become what they need them to be. Highly intelligent people do something different. Not always immediately, not always without pain, but eventually, they stop tolerating certain things entirely. Not out of arrogance, not out of impossibly high standards, but because a mind that processes everything at depth cannot compartmentalize the damage that certain relationship dynamics cause. It sees too clearly. It feels too precisely. It understands too specifically what is being lost to pretend otherwise. Here are 5 things that highly intelligent people will eventually stop tolerating in relationships, and the psychological reason behind each one. Research on relationship satisfaction and cognitive function has found something consistent. Highly intelligent people do not simply have higher standards, they have a different relationship with cognitive dissonance. When something is wrong in a relationship, their mind will not let it rest. It keeps returning to it, examining it, trying to understand it, looking for the pattern beneath it. And the longer something wrong goes unaddressed, the more mental bandwidth it consumes, the more it costs. Which is why, over time, highly intelligent people tend to develop very clear limits around the things they are no longer willing to pay for. Here are 5 of them. Thing number 1, dishonesty in any form. Not just lying, the subtle versions too. The half-truth that leaves out the part that would change everything. The performance of emotions that are not actually felt. The version of themselves someone presents in public that does not match who they are in private. Highly intelligent people have an unusually low tolerance for inauthenticity, not because they are judgmental, but because their mind is constantly processing signals. And when the signals do not match, when what someone says does not line up with what they do, when the story keeps shifting in ways that do not quite fit together, the discrepancy registers. Loudly. Psychologists call this cognitive inconsistency detection, the brain's tendency to notice when information conflicts with itself. For highly intelligent people, this process is more sensitive and more automatic. They notice the inconsistencies before they have words for them. They feel the inauthenticity before they can prove it. And once they feel it, it cannot be unfelt. Dishonesty does not just damage trust. For a highly intelligent person, it damages the entire architecture of how they understand the person in front of them, and an understanding built on false information is not something their mind will allow them to rest inside. Thing number 2, conversations that stay permanently shallow. This one is more subtle, and it causes more quiet pain than most people realize. Highly intelligent people need depth in their relationships. Not every conversation, not every moment, but somewhere in a relationship, there needs to be the possibility of going below the surface, of talking about things that actually matter, of being honest about what is hard, of exploring ideas together without the conversation collapsing back into small talk. When that depth is permanently unavailable, when every attempt to go deeper is deflected, dismissed, or met with discomfort, something begins to happen that is very difficult to reverse. The highly intelligent person starts editing themselves. They stop bringing the real questions. They stop sharing the real observations. They stop trying to have the kind of conversation they actually need. And gradually, they begin to feel fundamentally alone in the relationship. Not because the other person is bad, but because the relationship cannot hold the full weight of who they are. Psychologists call this intellectual intimacy deprivation. And for highly intelligent people, it is one of the most quietly damaging forms of disconnection that exists. Thing number 3, being made to feel that their mind is a problem. This one leaves marks. At some point, many highly intelligent people have been in a relationship where their thinking was a source of friction, where asking too many questions made the other person defensive, where noticing something that was not said was called paranoia, where thinking carefully before responding was mistaken for coldness, where needing to understand something fully before accepting it was treated as a challenge to authority. And somewhere in that friction, they learned to make themselves smaller, to ask fewer questions, to notice less out loud, to accept things they did not fully accept just to keep the peace. Psychologists call this intellectual suppression in relationships, and the research is consistent. When a person consistently suppresses their natural cognitive style to maintain a relationship, resentment accumulates, not always dramatically, but quietly, steadily, until the effort of being smaller than they actually are becomes a cost no amount of affection can offset. Highly intelligent people will eventually stop tolerating any relationship that requires them to be less intelligent in order to be loved. Thing number 4, passive dishonesty. This is different from the direct dishonesty in thing number 1. Passive dishonesty is subtler. It is the person who never lies outright, but never tells the full truth either. Who knows exactly what you need to hear and chooses to withhold it. Who watches you make a decision based on incomplete information and says nothing. Who is technically honest because they never said anything false, but is genuinely deceptive because honesty requires more than the absence of lies. For highly intelligent people, this form of dishonesty is often more damaging than direct lying, because it requires them to trust not just what someone says, but what someone chooses not to say. And for a mind that is already processing every available signal, the silence where a truth should have been is not invisible. It registers. It creates a low-level uncertainty that never fully resolves, a question that never gets answered because it was never allowed to be fully asked. Highly intelligent people need relationships where the whole truth is available, not just the parts that are convenient to share. Stop here for a moment, because something needs to be said before we continue. If you are recognizing yourself in these first 4, you may also be sitting with something uncomfortable. The memory of a relationship where you tolerated these things for longer than you should have, or a relationship you are in right now where some of this is happening, and you have been telling yourself it is manageable, that it is not that bad, that people are not perfect, that you are probably asking for too much. I want to say something clearly. Having standards is not arrogance. Needing honesty is not a personality flaw. Requiring depth is not elitism. Refusing to make yourself smaller to fit a relationship is not selfishness. These are not impossibly high standards. They are the conditions under which a highly intelligent person can actually be present, actually be vulnerable, actually be the version of themselves that a relationship requires to be real. Without them, you are not in a relationship. You are performing one. Stay with me. Thing number 5, the refusal to grow. This is the final one. And for many highly intelligent people, it is the hardest to leave behind. Because the person is not dishonest. The conversations can go deep enough. The relationship is not requiring them to suppress who they are. But something is missing. The other person has stopped moving, not just professionally, not just intellectually, in the deepest sense. They have stopped asking questions about themselves, stopped examining their patterns, stopped being curious about why they do what they do and who they are becoming. They have settled into a version of themselves that is comfortable enough to maintain and protect it enough, not to be threatened by anything new. For a highly intelligent person, this is profoundly isolating, not because they need their partner to match their intelligence, but because a mind that is always moving, always questioning, always reaching toward more depth and understanding will eventually find itself standing still in a relationship where stillness is the only option available. Psychologists call this growth incompatibility, the gradual divergence that occurs when two people's trajectories move in fundamentally different directions. It is not a failure. It is not anyone's fault. But for the highly intelligent person who needs their relationship to be a place of mutual becoming, a relationship that stopped growing is a relationship that started ending, even if nobody has said it yet. So here is what highly intelligent people will eventually stop tolerating in relationships: dishonesty in any forms, because their mind sees the inconsistencies too clearly to pretend they are not there. Permanent shallowness, because a relationship that cannot hold depth cannot hold them. Being made to feel their mind is a problem, Because no amount of love is worth the cost of being smaller than you actually are. Passive dishonesty. Because truth requires more than the absence of lies and the refusal to grow. Because a mind that keeps moving cannot stay connected to something that has decided to stay still. None of these are high standards in the conventional sense. They are not asking for perfection. They are not asking for someone who is equally intelligent. They are asking for something far more specific and far more rare. Honesty that does not require them to look away. Depth that does not require them to disappear. A relationship where who they actually are is not something that needs to be managed. If you have spent time in relationships that required you to be less, to see less, to feel less, to understand less than you actually do, those relationships were not your standard being too high. They were your standard not being high enough. You were not asking for too much. You were accepting too little. And the part of you that kept noticing, that kept returning to the inconsistency, that kept feeling the depth that was missing, was not the problem. It was trying to protect you the entire time. Which of these five felt like something you have tolerated for too long in a relationship you can think of right now? Leave it in the comments, because someone reading your words is sitting with the same recognition, and your honesty might be the first time they feel like their standards are not the problem. And if someone in your life keeps leaving relationships that everyone else thinks are fine, share this with them. Because sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is show them that what they could not tolerate was always worth not tolerating,